¿Cómo le pegaron a Irineo? Ahí estoy grabando y este oficial me está pegando.
Activists protest police abuse at the border. What happened after the shouting match that led to handcuffs?
The sea grapes are just a really beautiful species. They're edible. They are used a lot as decoration at high-end seafood places.
A new cash crop in the San Diego Bay. The biologists who may be able to satisfy the demand for seaweed.
The show has been therapy for me because I can't sing. I can't hear pitch enough.
Music legend inspires a new production at the Old Globe. Huey Lewis shows us the heart of rock and roll.
I used to fool around, but I couldn't take punishment and had to settle down.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Mexican state prosecutors are investigating the arrest of an activist who led the migrant caravans from Central America. KPBS immigration reporter Jean Guerrero has the story.
Tijuana's police director Mario Martinez held a press conference on Wednesday to explain the arrest of Irineo Mujica and another Pueblos Sin Fronteras activist. He said the two activists were demanding the release of a Honduran minor who'd been jailed without committing a crime. Martinez says the boy was picked up for his own safety while walking in a dangerous area.
They arrived screaming. We asked them to stay sensible. They didn't respect these indications.
Martinez says the two activists were handcuffed for using offensive language. That's where the accounts of police and activists diverge.
¿Cómo le pegaron a Irineo? Ahí estoy grabando y este oficial me está pegando.
Violence broke out, but the two sides disagree on who threw the punches.
¿Y cómo agarraron a Irineo?
Martinez says the activists were transferred to the state prosecutor on charges of, quote, affronting police. Activists protested outside the jail where they were being held Wednesday.
There's a formal complaint that's in process.
Pueblos Sin Fronteras member Tristan Call says their arrest shows a pattern of abuse.
This is something that happens every day. If you're poor, if you're a migrant, if you're a person of color, here in the city, the police come after people.
He says migrants are especially vulnerable. Mujica was scheduled to meet with police director Martinez to discuss these alleged police abuses one-on-one on Wednesday. But the meeting was canceled because he was in jail. The Pueblos Sin Fronteras activists were released from jail that evening. But the state prosecutor says they're still under investigation. The activists say they plan to continue protesting police abuses. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
The Trump administration says it's abandoning a landmark settlement that regulates how long and under what conditions immigrant children can be detained. Officials proposed new regulations that would let the government hold families until their immigration cases are decided. Homeland Security officials say abandoning the Flores Agreement of 1997 will speed up immigration cases. The department also says this could discourage people from illegally crossing the border. All classes resume tomorrow at Southwestern College after authorities responded to a campus threat. School officials evacuated the Chula Vista campus this morning. They also evacuated locations in Otay Mesa, National City, San Ysidro, and Coronado. A campus spokeswoman says a threat was overheard in a class last night by another student, and that student told authorities early today. Other students told 10 News what happened during the evacuations.
Like 5 seconds in, everyone from the entire school was just going out. Most people don't drive. They waited at the bus and they just like trampled each other into the bus sometimes. I saw that on our way.
Police connected with a person of interest in this case and say there is not a threat to the college. A health scare at San Diego State University. Hundreds of students lined up on campus for antibiotics today. This after an undergrad was infected with meningitis. County health officials warn the student may have exposed others. They say the exposure may have happened at a sorority event last weekend. Symptoms of the infection can include fever, headaches, stiff neck, and a rash. Some students told KPBS News they waited for hours.
There's people who rushed for sorority this weekend and might have been in contact with her, so we're all getting a pill to make sure we don't get sick.
San Diego County has received reports of 8 cases of the disease this year. Californians will vote this November on whether to repeal a gas tax increase passed last year. iNews Source reporter Jill Castellano tells us how San Diego has been behind the ballot initiative from the beginning.
At a packed meeting of the San Diego County Republican Party last month, Carl DeMaio arrived like a rock star. The former San Diego councilman and current radio talk show host is leading a grassroots campaign to repeal the state's gas tax.
We must decide that there is going to come a time that we say enough is enough. This is our fight. We stand here.
Prop 6 has become a rallying cry for Republican candidates who say it's a chance to show voters the Democratic Party doesn't care about how it's burdening Californians.
It's unfair to working families, hits them pretty hard, and it comes at a time when the politicians have shown that we can't trust them to fix our roads. They always divert and raid the funds.
Democrats say the money is needed for road repairs and can't be diverted under the current law. San Diego Assemblyman Todd Gloria says the gas tax is important for California's future.
That you cannot run 2018 infrastructure with 1990s revenues. It's just not fiscally responsible. It doesn't work.
Prop 6 has become a true grassroots effort in San Diego. DeMaio and his supporters gathered more than 1/5 of the 500,000 signatures required to put Prop 6 on the ballot from San Diego County. That's almost more than the much larger Los Angeles County. And more donations for the campaign have come from San Diego than any other city, with 1/3 of donors giving $100 or less. That's unusual, says UCSD political science professor Thad Kauser.
Ordinarily, initiatives in California have become the plaything of corporations, of unions, and of really rich individuals who can cut those big checks rather than small donors.
Labor unions and pro-business nonprofits are vastly outspending DeMaio to keep the gas tax in place. Prop 6 is retroactive, so the more than $1 billion already awarded to San Diego County would be lost if it passes. While voters have the ultimate say in November, Prop 6 has already shown San Diego is more relevant now in state politics than it has been in decades. For KPBS, I'm iNews Source reporter Jill Castellano.
To see who's donating for and against Prop 6, go to iNewsSource.org. iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. A new ruling says cities cannot prosecute people for sleeping on the streets if they do not have anywhere else to go. Judges say it's unconstitutional, amounting to cruel and unusual punishment. The decision could mean cities throughout California now have unenforceable homeless laws. Another lawsuit focuses on a homeless man's case in San Francisco, where his car was impounded because of unpaid parking tickets. He's now living in a shelter, unable to spend the thousands of dollars needed to get his car back.
These kinds of ways to criminalize homeless people, including not being able to sleep in your car, if it turns into a citation, if the citation turns into you're not able to pay it, then unfortunately, you could go to jail for not paying the fine. So it's just yet another way that communities tend to criminalize people experiencing homelessness.
The California League of Cities says it's reviewing homeless laws on the books. First, it was long lines. Now the California Department of Motor Vehicles is once again under fire, this time for making errors on 23,000 voter registration applications. The DMV says it happened between April 23rd and August 5th. The agency says it's making software updates and it's providing additional employee training to make sure the errors do not happen again.
This latest revelation about the botched voter registration is deeply concerning. I mean, you think about your voter registration, that's your ticket to participation in our democracy. And to botch that, to deny someone a vote by mail ballot when they request it, to register them with the wrong party, that's to deny someone their most fundamental rights in our democracy.
The Secretary of State says his office is working with county election officials to make sure anyone impacted is promptly notified. Today marked the final round of questioning for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh doesn't seem to have changed the minds of many on the Senate Judiciary Committee, led by Republicans. California Senator Kamala Harris asked him about possible conflicts in cases involving the president's civil or criminal liability.
Yesterday, Senator Blumenthal asked if you could recuse yourself in cases involving the personal civil or criminal liability of the president. You declined to say that you would. So my question is, could a reasonable person question your independence in cases involving the president's civil or criminal liability?
Sorry, can you repeat it one more time?
Would it be reasonable for someone to question your independence in cases involving the president's civil or criminal liability should that occur?
My independence, I believe, has been demonstrated through my 12-year record and what you've heard from the people who've worked with me. And I believe deeply in the independence of the judiciary. I rule based on the law. And you can look at cases that I've ruled against when I became a judge against the Bush administration. And I've talked about the history of our country and the history of the Supreme Court.
And on that point, sir, in particular the history of the Supreme Court and confirmation hearings, Justice Kagan, during her confirmation hearing, committed to recusing in cases she handled as Solicitor General. Justice Breyer committed to recusing in cases implicating his financial interest in Lloyd's of London. Justice Ginsburg refused to commit to recusing in cases that were on her D.C. Circuit recusal list. Justice Scalia committed at the hearing to recuse in a case implicating an issue that was the same as an issue he had decided as a D.C. Circuit judge. So my question to you is, will you commit to recusing in any case involving the civil or criminal liability of the president who appointed you?
Right.
Or nominated you?
The independence of the judiciary requires that I not commit to how I would decide a particular case and to issue a commitment on a discretionary recusal issue in either direction. So if I answered that question in either direction, that would be I would be violating my judicial independence in my view by committing in this context. I've explained.
So, but with all due respect, sir, if I've shared with you that other nominees sitting at that desk or some desk like that have committed to recusing. There have been circumstances where they have committed. So is it your opinion then that they violated some ethical code or rule?
I don't know all the circumstances, but I believe those were situations that were required recusals where they had previously had to recuse and were simply indicating their required recusals. But I don't know all the circumstances.
Republicans hope to confirm Kavanaugh in time for the first day of the new Supreme Court term, October 1st. A forest fire in the Sierra Nevada shut down a major highway and forced the evacuation of a military base. The Delta fire tripled in size overnight near the California and Oregon border. Truckers abandoned big rigs and drivers left their cars behind as flames moved closer to Interstate 5 in Redding. The Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center was also evacuated. Firefighters have it at 3% containment. Temperatures start to climb this weekend. Justin Pavic shows us where we can expect hot weather in tonight's forecast.
Well, it looks like the marine layer will gradually start to erode over the course of the next couple of days, and that will bring about some warmer temperatures and less morning cloud cover. Temperatures then will start to climb. Dry conditions will persist. You can see that on the satellite radar right now. We're not talking about any precipitation. La Jolla, northbound to Oceanside, southbound to Chula Vista, and areas off to the east. Big picture, the bigger picture, I should say, here over the southwest shows, again, a moisture well off to the east. We're not going to be talking about any wet weather really anytime soon. Let's head in toward tonight. Again, the Padres away here the next couple of days. Looking at the 60s for lows for most. San Diego right around 70. Of course, further inland, Borrego Springs, the warm spot, down to 77. But again, the clouds come back into play. Still talking about that onshore flow. It starts to break down some here as we venture our way in toward the upcoming weekend. For tomorrow, back up to 80. So again, we're a few degrees above normal. But just wait till you see what's coming up down the road. Notice here, Borrego Springs, also a hot afternoon, climbing up to 110. Mount Laguna over the higher terrain, even into the lower 80s. All right, let's check out the weekend. And we're going to see an area of high pressure continue to strengthen. This will start to pull the air a little more offshore. So as the flow switches around, we'll start to see those temperatures climb a bit here Saturday into Sunday for even the coast. Look at this, mid to upper 80s, going well above normal. About the warmest we've really felt since, let's say, mid-August, about a month's worth of time. As we check out the inland locations, very hot Saturday and Sunday, talking about the mid to the upper 90s. Mountainous terrain also climbing well into the 80s. We'll back off in the heat some by early next week. And now the desert locations also very hot Saturday into Sunday. We'll back off in the heat some and stay dry early next week. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic. Back over to you, Ebony.
The San Diego Zoo Safari Park's 3-week-old elephant was out for a stroll with its herd today. Umzula Zuli was born just a little more than 3 weeks ago. The calf weighed more than 270 pounds, becoming the largest elephant calf born at the safari park. 13 elephants live in the herd, including 4 adults and 9 youngsters. San Diego Bay is already an economic hub with tourism, ship operations, and the military. And there's apparently room for more. Biologists are hoping to add farming to the list to satisfy the taste for seaweed. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has details.
So this is the farm site.
Leslie Boer walks on a floating platform between an empty fish pen and the deteriorating Grape Street Pier. This is where Boer and her partner hope to see a 90-foot by 40-foot underwater farm take root.
It's quite compact, but remember, we have 24 feet of water column to work with, so it's actually a pretty large cubic space when you look at it.
Twine will be strung across the space at varying depths, and that rope will anchor a number of different seaweed species, which started their lives in a lab.
They're growing on a large spool. It's just twine around PVC pipe, right? So once these juveniles are grown out on that spool, we transport the spool out, and then we take it on preset lines, and we just unspool it along those preset lines, and it just continues to grow on that line.
Weekly dives will allow the team to monitor how the lines and the fledgling plants are doing. Boer wants to make sure that other plants or animals don't move in and push their crop out of the way. Then about every 6 weeks, they harvest.
In order to preserve the biodiversity, we don't want to clear cut every 3 months, right? So we want to selectively harvest and selectively plant so that we can kind of keep this 3-dimensional structure the whole time.
The Sunken Seaweed Company is a collaboration between Boer and her partner, Tori Polizzi. He's got a bucket with a few samples of what they hope to grow. A light leafy plant he's holding in his hand is not surprisingly called sea lettuce.
If you're a fisherman or if you've been around boats, you've seen this growing off the side of your boat or on the ropes.
Polizzi says most people don't know it's a very nutritious and tasty sea vegetable. And there are a few more species the team hopes to put on local plates.
The sea grapes are just a really beautiful species.
The purple plant has bulbs that resemble their namesake.
They're edible. They are used a lot as decoration at high-end seafood places.
Those seem perfectly suited for the delicate and expensive palates of local diners, but not everything they plan to harvest has that ready-for-market name.
Another one we have here is Deadman's Fingers.
Maybe not the best name.
These, yeah.
For an ocean plant that they hope ends up in a fancy eatery. Even so, Polizzi says the plants which grow near the shore where the tides wash over them have a future.
Something that chefs have done with these is tempura them and put it in a lot of sushi recipes. It's a really spongy, rather tasty species.
The small company got a boost from the Port of San Diego's business incubator. Rafael Castellanos is the port's chair. He says tourism, ship operations, and retail already power a big chunk of the local economy, but the port is working to broaden the bay's economic palette.
There's a tremendous amount of opportunity here to diversify our lines of business in a way that is sustainable, and that's good for the port, it's good for the environment, it's good for the region and everybody in the state of California.
Castellanos says a fledgling oyster business near Tuna Harbor and this effort are part of what he hopes becomes part of the blue ocean-based economy. And he says the bay is clean enough to handle it.
And we're getting all of the required health certifications in order to be able to sell these products. So we're not concerned about that. We're very optimistic about that. And again, we've been working very hard for many years to keep the bay clean and make sure it's suitable for this type of venture.
Lobster fishermen have already figured out a way to make an economic living beneath the surface of the bay. And now the port and the folks at Sunken Seaweed are hoping to do the same. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, fallout from the scathing essay that reveals resistance to the president from inside the White House. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Today, people are remembering TV and movie star Burt Reynolds after news of his passing.
You've got your camera, you've got your film, you got your lights, you got your sound, you got your lab costs, you got your developing, you got your syncing, you got your editing. Before you turn around, you spent maybe $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 on a movie.
Reynolds was nominated for an Oscar for his role in 1997's Boogie Nights. He was also known for his performances in such movies as Deliverance and Smokey and the Bandit. Reynolds was also affectionately referred to as the godfather of the Georgia film industry after making about 10 movies there, mostly in the 70s and 80s. His manager says the 82-year-old died at his Florida home. He is survived by a son. They did it with Mamma Mia and American Idol. Now Huey Lewis joins the ranks of pop music icons with a Broadway-style production of his own. KPBS arts reporter Nina Guerin takes us behind the scenes at the Old Globe.
San Diego's launched some pretty famous jukebox musicals. Shows like Jersey Boys and Escape to Margaritaville that use existing pop songs to tell a story. Now, the Old Globe is hoping for a Broadway hit with its latest project, The Heart of Rock and Roll, featuring songs by 80s band Huey Lewis and the News.
One of the things that matters most to us is our reputation as an incubator of great new works of musical theater for the American stage. The Heart of Rock and Roll will be the Old Globe's 34th world premiere musical. And when it moves to Broadway, and I'm going to say that on the record, when it moves to Broadway, it will be the Old Globe's 25th Broadway transfer.
I used to fool around. The Heart of Rock and Roll is about a musician who quits Chicago's dive bar scene and joins corporate America. Written by Jonathan Abrams and Tyler Mitchell, the musical is not based on Lewis's life, but it is inspired by his hit songs like The Power of Love and Hip to Be Square.
I found it amazing that they could actually weave this story and find a common thread with all these songs, because I'm trying to write about completely different subjects all the time. I don't want one song to have anything to do with another, and yet they managed to find a thread. And the way they explained it to me is that they just immersed ourselves in our music, heaven help them, listened to it day and night, jogged, etc. And this personality emerged that became the personality of this band. And somehow I think I see that.
The Heart of Rock and Roll comes at a new chapter in Lewis's life. The 68-year-old singer was recently diagnosed with a hearing disease that keeps him from performing live.
The show has been therapy for me because I can't sing. I can't hear pitch enough. I've been diagnosed with what they call Meniere's disease, which is actually a syndrome based on symptoms. They really don't know what it is. And my hearing distorts and low frequencies, so the music is impossible for me to listen to because I can't find pitch, so I can't sing. Which is very depressing when I contemplate it. But this has been kind of therapeutic for me because it's something I can do and think about and work on, you know.
Through this process, Lewis has seen his radio-friendly songs transform into big Broadway-style numbers. He's also been able to connect with a generation of singers raised on his music. Do you believe it's true? Like the Heart of Rock and Roll star Matt Doyle.
I grew up in the same town as Huey Lewis in Ross, California, and moved there when I was about 12 years old, and I was obsessed with Back to the Future. So all my mom had to tell me was, Matt, the guy that wrote Back in Time and Power of Love lives like next door. And so I kind of became obsessed at a relatively young age and dived deep into, you know, even all the B-sides and everything, and just listened to all of his albums, even through high school, driving to school, and saw him at the grocery store. But he didn't know that when they hired me, so I got to really creep him out and say his address when we first moved there, when we first got into rehearsal.
Did you really do that?
Yeah, I totally did. I was like, 87 Laurel Grove. He was like, what the hell is happening? He's awesome, and I'm a massive Huey Lewis fan, so this is a dream come true for sure.
But why exactly did Lewis pick San Diego as a place to launch his musical?
Well, it's not because I have a condo 1 hour away. No, the Old Globe has a wonderful cachet, and Barry Edelstein does such a great job here. When we first schemed this thing, this was our dream, was that we'd open here in San Diego at the Globe, and it's happened. So far, so good.
For KPBS Arts, I'm Nina Guerin.
The Heart of Rock and Roll begins previews tonight and runs through October 21st at the Old Globe. Now here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, Raise a Glass to Craft Beer, the summit on suds that looks at the growth of this Golden State industry. And on Midday Edition, your weekend preview on the sights, sounds, and flavors of San Diego. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.